Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Allie's Corner. We are going to be discussing Joseph Quinn's character Billy Knight in CB Strike, and how he communicates and how mental illness can affect that communication, whether it's body language or affecting how he's communicating verbally. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that this week. So let's go ahead and dive in. So Billy Knight is a really great developed character that Joseph plays really well within the Strike universe, which is amazing all itself. First impressions when I saw this character was such an amazing, well-rounded, well-versed character. When you first see him in a scene where he's coming in contact with Strike and he's actually broken into Strike's office, and you see him approaching him going, I have a crime to report, and then he starts having his tics, which is a part of his communication, because nobody seems to realize that that is a part of his communication, especially when he starts getting stressed or worried, or he's not feeling himself. You can start seeing that. That's really where we start to see the character start to be fleshed out. He has the tics of rubbing his nose, rubbing his face, hiding, trying to be as covert as possible. He's got longer hair, he's got some facial hair, and he talks like he is still a child. Which we know during that episode, he starts off as really manic, and he's in a manic episode, and he's just running. He's not on medication, and he's going through the processes. So he's remembering things that are happening in his childhood, and he didn't have a really great upbringing. But he says that he remembers somebody hurting someone, and he's reporting that. And he says that he remembers them putting them on the eye, and he carves out with wood carving tools the horse, and he says remembers somebody burying someone on the eye of where the horse would be. His memory is a little bit skewed, because that character of Billy has gone through a lot of trauma. That man has gone through a lot of trauma. So you're really starting to see and delve into a lot of different things, a lot of different characteristics within the Strike universe. Strike takes him at face value, asks him, hey, what is your name, where you live? And he's like, no, I can't tell you that. He starts to get really agitated. He starts to get really more in depth, and you have Strike's partner that's there, that's helping him, starts to record just so we can figure out who this person is. And then as he's writing his information down, he gets spooked because he sees her doing what she's doing, and he rips the paper off. So he's communicating in a way of he's scared, like he's super scared. He's skittish, and he doesn't really trust anybody, and you can see that from the way that he interacts. And so when you see that from the way that he interacts with people, that is going to make sure that he's doing what he can to help everybody that is around him, right? So when that happens, you're having all of that kind of come together and really be part of the whole universe of Strike at that point. And we're trying to get everything kind of be very copacetic when everything happens. So Strike now has to seek him out. Strike is trying to find him, trying to seek him out, and he finds him with his brother, and he breaks in, finds Billy. It's like, hey, I've been looking for you. He's like, nope, you don't see me, which is kind of interesting because he's hiding, and he's not wanting people to find him. He's like, you're gonna kill me if you get caught, and he runs. So we see a lot in that character of like, there's a lot of trauma, but we also see him with his brother, right? So his brother's like, here, I need you to carve this for me. And they look like they always go between houses. So it's not always like they're in the same spot all the time. So they kind of go in between houses and in between things, which also means that it's not a great stable upbringing or a stable upbringing. So this man, who is an adult, is still does not have the stability that he ultimately needs. So we're starting to see that in more fulfilled pieces, and he's carving with wood carving kits, and he hurts his hands a lot of the time, and every time Strike goes to see him, they move. So when he does finally find him, and he's like, nope, you can't see me, you're gonna get me killed, and he goes through and lets him know that, hey, everything's gonna be okay, we can protect you. Billy doesn't trust him because Billy doesn't trust his brother. Like, he trusts his brother, but he doesn't really trust his brother. He doesn't trust people that are telling him the truth. So he's kind of living up in his own head. With these manic episodes that he has, he's been living in his own head. So he's wanting to make sure that he's getting what he needs, but he's also wanting to make sure that he has a feel safe and somebody that he can trust. And he doesn't feel that he has that. So he, does what his brother asks because his brother's been his keeper this entire time, since, the parents and all of that stuff. And then you can see Billy still communicating with the rubbing of the nose, the rubbing of the face. He's stimming when he gets stressed. He's trying to self-soothe because he's a self-soothing methods. And he runs when he can't self-soothe. He's trying to get himself out of that situation, which leads to him ultimately getting stabbed. And Strike having to come across that and helping him get to where he needs. And they put him in a hospital to where he can recover. And when they asked to go see him the first time, they're like, he may be a little bit out of it. He may not be up for talking. He's just on this medication. So he's coming down from being in that manic episode, finally being put on medication for stabilizers. Usually they're mood stabilizers. It doesn't specify, but he's coming out of that manic state, and he's finally coherent at what's ultimately happening. And he talks about it. He talks about how he doesn't feel that he has to run. He talks about how he kind of feels more normal. And we're going to put normal in quotes because normal is kind of individual to each person. It's not a societal thing. Normal can be defined societally, but also the state of normal for people or individuals. And Strike is like, well, I'm glad to see you're doing better, and I'm glad to hear you're feeling better. When you are feeling more up to it, we want to bring someone by to talk to you and describe ultimately what happens. So then they find the woman that shared the farm across from where his parents and things were, and found out what they ultimately were like doing during the time he was a child, and found out that it was a horse they were putting down, and then described that to him, and he smiles, and that's where they kind of leave off. So they explain that to him, and he's like, you don't have to pity me. She's like, it's not pity, I want to make sure that you're happy and safe. So they pay for his stay, pay for him to stay stabilized, which is really sweet because he still does this when he gets agitated because it's a self-soothing method. He communicates really well. Like, the more that he's centered and more on the stabilizers, you can start seeing his personality actually come out, and he's not scared, he's not running, and he's doing more to actually be himself, which is good for his character. It's good to make sure that he's able to do what he needs to be doing to go through the process of making sure that he has what he needs, and he's really going through and kind of communicating. But when he's in that manic state, he's like panicked. You can see he communicates in a panicked rush tone. He rubs his face, and his hands are like really rubbing. He usually cuts his hands with the wood carving. He was forced to do the wood carving by his brother too a lot of the time to keep him calm and keep him collected, which is not the greatest thing to be doing to someone that may not be in the best mental headspace. And the other pieces of that is, like, he's his own person. I get that he may need someone to help watch him there's other ways to help watch someone. You don't need to like force them into doing stuff that they ultimately shouldn't have been forced into doing. So he's now being taken care of at the end of that episode, and he's happy and he's smiling and he's, you know, wearing really soft clothes, where he was dirty in the beginning and communicating that he wasn't taken care of, wasn't getting what he needed. He has more of a flush to his face. He looks a little bit healthier. His hair's cleaner. His beard is less straggly than it was in the beginning. He's more along the lines of somebody who's being taken care of and helped versus just being kind of dragged around and doing what is being asked of him. Joseph plays that character really well. Like, he really delved into that character and really went above and beyond when it came to being able to communicate with someone that has a mental illness. He does it really well and really, like, make sure that he can portray characters really well that may not be people we see in society as socially okay. And it's a lot of things in society we kind of deviate away from, but he did extremely well in that one. It's one of my favorite characters that he has played outside of Arthur, outside of Eddie, outside of ones that people know. And when you start seeing all of that come together and start seeing the passion that is in that character in their own way, in their own world, because that character is living in his own world, in his own head, and how that world operates, and how, like, he's always kind of on the run and he hasn't quite settled down. He doesn't feel safe enough to settle down. He doesn't feel safe enough to not be on the run. He doesn't feel safe enough with the people that surround him, including his brother. Like, you can see that in the way his body language is, because he's kind of always cowered or kind of always touching his face because he's always trying to self-soothe, due to the fact is he doesn't have that safety net. And at the end, when he's in the hospital, his hands are not always up by his face unless he's getting agitated where he needs to self-soothe. And then it comes back down to where he's like, okay, I can self-soothe in that way, versus doing that constantly. He's not looking at, you know, maybe hurting himself because he's rushing, or hurting himself in any other way, shape, or form. So self-harm is kind of off that table. And it's such a beautiful character that's really thought and really well played out. And I think we need a lot more characters like that so people can feel really connected. And it's about the character, right? So it's not about usually the story arc and whatnot. That character is really fleshed out by the actor that plays them. That actor, Joseph, Joseph has played characters that are amazing. He creates characters and he makes them, like, the writers that create them do amazing jobs, but it's the actors that really put the characters to life and really bring them into their own and really give them the personality and make them who they are as a character. And Joseph does that really well. He makes sure that every character he plays is unique, and he does that really well. I'm excited to see when all of that happens. A lot of his newer stuff that is going to be coming out, especially things like Horde, which is super exciting. Trailers should be coming out soon for that, and seeing him play Michael, which is going to be very interesting because those characters in that movie have a lot of trauma that they've got to talk through. But that's going to be this week's episode for Allie's Corner, talking about how Billy communicated in CB Strike. And next week, we're going to kind of delve off of the Joseph Quinn train. We're going to jump into Sebastian Stan, and some of the characters that he has played and how they communicate. And we'll kind of start off on that. The first one we're going to start off with is James Buchanan Barnes, so Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. We're going to talk about each of those. I think the first one we're going to start off with is the Winter Soldier persona. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll kind of work into Bucky and then maybe James prior to him being the Winter Soldier. And we'll talk about each of those through the eyes of the movie franchise. So we'll kind of go through that. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you next week.